Yay Networks.
With me, it was always an honor and a privilege to have been born in a family where they had contact with the Japanese and learned this art, and then they understood the value of it and passed it on to us as a principle for living. And yes, they use fighting to illustrate all the character traits that we should develop as human beings to exist in the world in a better place.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Happily Ever Amber podcast. I actually didn't wake up happy today. I woke up really depressed. And do you know what I did? This force shoved me on my feet and my knees, and I said a prayer and it worked. So switching gears, Riley Emmett dressed me today. I'm super excited, but I'm so excited for this particular podcast because Cesalina Gracie is coming on. If you do not know who Cesalina Gracie is, she's like the modern day real life Disney version of a badass woman that you want not only to become yourself, but you want your children to become. She climbed Mount Everest this past May. She is the granddaughter of the man who founded Brazilian jiu-jitsu. And I had the opportunity to take both London and Riley to her school in Los Angeles. And she's all about empowerment. And it was really amazing to see my kids walk out. They stood a little bit taller. They did the pose of the champion, and I am so excited to go and go on this journey with my kids and teach them jiu-jitsu in life. But today's episode is going to be really exciting, so I hope you guys enjoy this episode. So we were talking about mindset, right? Because
we're talking about pessimism and then mindset, yeah.
Yeah, because I'm pessimistic. I think I'm going to fail at everything I do, and I think part of that, honestly, is growing up in the entertainment business and constantly being rejected, right? So it's like the lottery. So I think that's kind of how I was groomed. And so I asked you, did you just fucking come out of your mom's womb going I could do anything, climb Mount Everest or where's this mindset? So you're talking about it's part of the Gracie family.
Well, we are born in within a family that has spent generations building a way of living. That's literally what we do. We learn these tools and then we built a methodology to share with the world. And it's all about your self-development and then how you impact your community around you and how you interact with those around you and how you interact with problems and how you interact with that internal voice. So since we are young, yes, we are introduced to this art, and then we learn that we are special. We are inflicted with that mentality since we are little, because you're
your mom, your dad is just kind of something.
Your uncles, your cousins, you're a champion, and we got you. We are doing this together. But the day that we're not there, you can also do it alone. And that is the importance of whatever it is that you do, whether it's jiu-jitsu or if you find other practices that build you internally. Because we all have this idea that the champion is the one that stands on top of the podium, that's always proud of themselves, and that don't have self-doubt, and that don't have bad days, but that's not true. The reality is, in order for you to become a champion, you have to be building an internal constitution that eventually becomes so solid that no matter what comes into you, no matter what challenge you're gonna face, if you have problems in your relationships, you have that place to return to that holds you up and that keeps you grounded.
That is so wonderful. And that is honestly why. So I brought the girls and I shared with you right when we left. I don't know what the heck you did, but you put a spell on my kids and they were so different for a few hours after that. And then they went back to their normal selves. But I experienced for the first time in my life what jiu-jitsu can do. And that was just after one session. So I can only imagine, training a lifelong. So I wish I can go back and have another child and train them at birth, jiu-jitsu, what that would end up looking like. But, okay, so let's talk about your childhood and when you started jiu-jitsu and you're I imagine it has to be a love, and then at some point you just get tired of doing it, and it's one of those things that your parents just keep making you do, and you're I fucking hate it. But then as an adult and as you get older, you grow this appreciation for this beautiful foundation that your family gave you.
Yeah, I love that you asked that because it's so interesting how our relationship changes with things that have been around the whole time. And then at some point, you do need to almost create a separation from it just to understand who am I without this thing or without this philosophy or without these people. And a lot of us grow up in environments where we kind of feel like that thing is stuck with us. With me, it was always an honor and a privilege to have been born in a family where they had contact with the Japanese and learned this art, and then they understood the value of it and passed it on to us as a principle for living. And yes, they use fighting to illustrate all the character traits that we should develop as human beings to exist in the world in a better place. So for me, you know, it's hard to create a separation between when did jiu-jitsu begin, because we're in this space right now, and if this was my living room, there would be mats on the floor, just to make it clear. So we literally learned to crawl and to walk and to play. Everything was created and explored in that space. So there was no separation like, Cesalina, this is the day that you will begin your jiu-jitsu journey.
Yeah, it's in your blood. It's in your DNA.
It was there,
It
right?
was
like
there.
you're playing, you're a kid. I don't know how to walk, literally. I'm crawling and I'm learning how to roll, how to fall and protect my face. And then it developed into competition. My dad signed me up for a competition at 6 years old. And it's interesting when you ask, like, did you love it and then you hate it? With me, it was more, what is my purpose and what is the reason I'm in this? Because from the first competition that I was enrolled, I never felt in my heart that I was in the right place. When it came to, in order for me to succeed and thrive in this environment, I need to beat them up. And at the time when I was competing, girls didn't even have a place in competition. We would fight against boys. You know, it's by age group and by belt system, and there you go. And still, even when you're a kid, slowly, you know, you start noticing the differences in strength and power, and then in their behavior towards you and you towards them. And then it's a super enriching experience. But at the same time, even when I won the matches, I would still leave upset. You know, the referee would raise my arm as a champion and I would run to the bathroom to throw up. And I just couldn't understand in my heart why, in order for me to be a winner, to make my family happy, I had to then make that kid on the other side a loser. So I started slowly moving away from competition. I had some injuries, and then, you know, my dad finally accepted that it wasn't for me, that I didn't love it. But I kept practicing jiu-jitsu. And when I moved to London at 17 years old, I moved completely away from jiu-jitsu. And then that was the moment where I was like, I wouldn't even tell people my last name. And I feel like in a way when, you know, you're finally leaving your home, you want to discover, do people respect me for who I am?
Yeah.
Or is it because of my family name and they're afraid there will be 100 cousins coming after them if they say something, you know? So it was interesting. It was the first time in my life that I didn't put on a gi for 4 years. It was the only time in my life to this day that I stayed away from the mats. And it was the moment where I used jiu-jitsu the most.
Oh, wow.
Which was really interesting to me.
In what ways?
In every single way. Both in being safe, in learning how to stand up for myself, how to use verbal jiu-jitsu, how to use my voice, how to use my posture, my body language, how to read the signs and not hesitate, act at the right time, and how to have the courage to explore, to go after opportunities, to introduce myself to people that I've never met, to go on trips alone. It was the full spectrum of safety and the pivotal tools that every single girl and woman needs to navigate in the world, especially if you look at statistics, is undeniable, all the way to what are the things that hold us back from achieving our dreams, from exploring, from discovering the world. What is the self-sabotage conversation that we have with ourselves that prevent us from actually going there? So I both was able to navigate the world safely, and I had really close calls. And at the same time, I had the ability of believing in myself and just going for it.
So when you were in London, did something just like switch where you're like, wow, I'm using it, and I didn't even know that I was using it, but now I know?
It started with a scare, right? Like the first time I was at a supermarket And I moved to London. I was modeling with elite models in Brazil, and they had a headquarters in London. And you can tell by observing our behavior that we are not from there, right? I'm like trying to understand pounds, British pounds, how much does this cost? And you're walking everywhere going like, where's the bread in the supermarket? Like you're not familiar yet, right? So it's really important that we understand that there are signs that people are reading on us that we are not even noticing ourselves. And those are the dynamics that puts us in situations a lot of times where if we don't have an awareness that has been trained for a long time, you don't recognize that because you don't have the ability of shifting that perspective and trying to understand how am I being recognized in this space. So I was totally like, where am I? I just moved here. And this guy's like following me at the supermarket. And when I leave the market, he grabs me and there's a black Mercedes outside and they try to put me inside the car.
No.
Literally, yeah. So like they grab me on the wrist, I do like a wrist release and I run for my life, right? And I had several other situations, but that was the first one that my heart was racing. I was like, wow, if I didn't know jiu-jitsu, who knows where was I going? Like he was offering me a ride, which was really weird, you know? And when I resisted and when I stood up, like then they tried to do something and things happened in the split of a second, right? Yeah. And later on, then I lived in London for 4 years and then, you know, that was one isolated incident, nothing happened then for a few years. And then I was working at this restaurant and I was closing the shift. I was leaving the place at like 2 a.m. And this manager comes into the locker room, the changing room, and blocks me at the door and starts saying, you know, very disrespectful verbal comments. And basically like I couldn't leave. He's blocking the door. Right. So, and in that moment, I didn't need to use any physical skills, but my body language, the way I made eye contact and how I projected my voice, using the voice of command and using the verbal jiu-jitsu to set a boundary and to state the outcome that I want from that situation, which is get out of the door, I'm leaving now. And knowing how to navigate in that space, never turn your back, because it's subtle. It's if in that moment I freeze because my nervous system hasn't been trained throughout my life and now he's making comments and then I'm scared because it's the manager. So maybe what do? We laugh and we make ourselves smaller. We shrink, right? And we immediately stop looking at the person. We start looking at the floor and we become so uncomfortable, which now I'm giving you the signs that I am a victim, that there's no resistance. And that's what abusers look for. They look for the path of least resistance. That's why like train your kids and hopefully nothing will ever happen. But it's better to know it and never need it than need it and not know it. And the fact that you actually know it, you navigate the world differently. Your awareness is different. The way you look at people is different. The way your body language speaks for yourself.
I mean, just in LA, like going to the mall, I have been a victim of someone coming up when I was 6 months pregnant with Riley, putting a knife to my stomach and taking my bag, leaving an acting class. And I wish I would have, I mean, there was nothing I could do. He was like 6 foot and I'm like, 5'4", 6 months pregnant. But it just having that sense of like standing taller, or even when I go to the mall and I'm walking through parking garages, because unfortunately the way our world is, you have to be careful. Yeah. And so you just like, I catch myself like actually just standing taller and looking like, don't fuck with me, like kind of thing. Yeah. Even though I'd probably be like, okay, I'm kidding, don't do that. So it's really amazing that like your posture, the way you speak, the commands, and knowing that your body instinctually will go into this like defense mode or protecting yourself mode, I guess.
And that's so interesting that you say that, because we need those reminders, right? And even if you've been training for a while, you have those tools living in you, and then you stay away for too long, at least from my experience, I start hesitating in some scenarios where I'm like, oh, I need to be on the mats. My life just changes. If I don't train for a couple of months and I go back to the mats, then suddenly everything falls back into place because we need those reminders. And as women too, like we need to be reminded that we can give ourselves permission to respond when we need to respond.
Right, and without judgment too. So like when I was pregnant and I got robbed at knife point, like I was telling you, as soon as it was like 9 p.m., I was in Hollywood, and as soon as I turned the corner and I was on this dark street, but there, actually did have a few street lights. I turned the corner and I saw this guy walking, And I just, it's like this still small voice or something in my gut just said, this is not good, turn around. And I said, no. I said, no, you're fine. Don't be like, this is ridiculous. Don't, you know.
And then it's so important that you're saying that. It's so important. One of the main things I teach on the mats, which is really interesting, the human species is the only species that judges our instinct, right? And women do that more than anybody. A cat, a dog, it doesn't matter. If they feel scared, if they feel threatened, if something is off, they're going to respond to that. And they are going to listen to their instincts. We are born with it. It's innate in us. Women constantly judge their instincts. We're walking by the street, we see somebody walking by us. We don't understand that actually your brain is reading their facial expression, their body language. Right. You can pick up on so many signs that your body is not even fast, like your brain can't even process it fast enough. Yeah. Therefore, we judge it.
And
instead
I knew.
Of trusting.
I freaking knew. And so I said, no, just cross the street. This happened within seconds. I said, instead of walking towards him, cross the street. So at least if something happens, you'll be in the light of the lamppost. That thought. So what did I do? I did that. And as soon as I crossed the street, he comes running, pulls out the knife, holds it to my stomach, tells me to give me my keys. And I thought that he was going to kidnap me. And that's like my biggest fear. I was like, oh my God, the moment is happening. Like he's throwing me in the car. This is it. And he chucked my keys into this elementary school, took my purse, asked for my phone, and then he ended up just taking off. And thank God I didn't go into labor, but I was in it didn't even hit me. Like I walked back into the class and I was like, I just got robbed at knife point. And people were like, what? Like my body went I just froze.
Yeah. This is a reminder for every woman and everybody out there.
Yes.
Trust your instinct, because what's the worst that can happen? Nothing. If you walk into an elevator, you're in Vegas with your friends, and you forgot something, you forgot your makeup in the room, and you're going back up, and you just tell your friends to keep going, and the minute you go back in the elevator, a guy walks in, I don't care how he looks. It can be a woman, it can be the elderly, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Train
yourself to trust that instinct. If something feels off, it is. And what's the worst that can happen? Leave the elevator. If they're going to yell at you, call you names, perfect. That's much better than them following you into your room. Right? Like you see something feels off, cross the street. What's the worst that can happen, right? So and if they do cross the street, they're giving you signs, right? But there's so many other steps that we need to use to control that scenario, which is immediately using our voice, right? The minute we are crossing the street, we can already be making eye contact and engaging. Stay away from me.
Right.
Do not come this way. And now do I enter a business? Do I look for somebody else who is passing? And you need to keep that distance, because the only reason why they're able to close a distance in you is because we hesitate and we don't act. Because if they're running, you can run. Or in your case, obviously, you were 6 months pregnant. But the reality is, most of the time, what holds us back from finding ourselves in a situation where we take control of the dynamics and we remain safe is the hesitation. And we are hoping we are judging the fact that then we didn't hear our instinct when the thing is happening. Like, I knew it, I should. But this is all a waste of energy. This is all a waste of time. So what I feel that is so helpful when women come into my program, and to give context, I have a school of empowerment based on the principles of jiu-jitsu and psychology for that reason, is because the scenarios we go through, nobody else goes through. A guy does not leave his house holding his key in between his hands in case he needs to be safe, So
they don't understand.
They don't understand.
No.
And there are several things that we can do to anticipate, to de-escalate a scenario, and to prevent scenarios. And that's what jiu-jitsu is for.
And I love that. I love that you're teaching this to young kids. And it doesn't matter what age. You could start at, how young did the youngest?
I start with 2 years old.
Okay,
actually.
so from 2 years old all the way to 100, right? Yeah. You could learn these tools. And so it's what is so beautiful, and I get so excited thinking about jiu-jitsu now, is that it's not only training your physical body, right? It's training your mind. So you're spending an hour, a couple hours, however long the sessions are, doing both. And that's beautiful.
Yeah, because the reality is the same hesitation that we have when we feel unsafe navigating the world, it's just the mindset. It's the same hesitation that you have when you were hired for a project, and every time you try to share your idea, you get interrupted by a coworker. And then you you want to say something to that coworker. You want to inform them that you didn't finalize and conclude your thoughts, but you hesitate. And it's the same hesitation when the very first time, perhaps your partner has a disrespectful behavior towards you, you hesitate. Oh, it's not that big of a deal.
You make excuses.
You make excuses. It's not, and it's that hesitation that holds you back from living your best life. I'm not here saying that every woman needs to learn how to fight and go out there and become, do justice in the world. It's like the mindset that the mindset changes that you go through by learning these tools and actually applying them outside of the mats. Because to me, like we were talking about my time in London, that was the first time that I actually realized that jiu-jitsu is the most valuable when used outside of the mats. And climbing Mount Everest was a second scenario where I decided to really get those principles and put them to test in the most extreme scenarios. But that's how much I trust it. I know that the principles that I have learned. You've proved
it. You've actually proved it, which is so and I say this all the time on the podcast, is I'm such a data person and I need to see proof, even though I grew up in the Mormon church and their spirituality and you have faith and but for me, when I see that data and watching you, and we're going to get into the whole Mount Everest thing because that is freaking insane to me. It's you're living and walking proof, which is great. And now you have this beautiful word that you could spread through an art, which is incredible because our world needs it. Our world needs it now so much.
Yeah. And if we can learn, because I believe from the bottom of my heart that when you have human beings that are more confident, men, women, boys, girls, navigating in the world, we do create a more peaceful and respectful society. Because from my work with kids, and I don't work only with the girl that is shy, only with the girl that has lost her voice, only with the girl that was born with a physical challenge, I work with the bully. I work with the girl that comes into my class and I recognize right away, oh, she is the aggressive one. Oh, she's the manipulative one. Is that my daughter, Riley?
Is that Riley? It's so funny because my kids are so opposite. You have London, who's anxiety and shy, and I'm trying to open her up to you really use her voice and just be find herself. And then you have Riley, who's just I mean, you saw it. How would you describe how Riley is?
It's so interesting because I won't directly describe her, but
okay, she's not the bully though. I don't. Right,
she's not. She's
the bully.
definitely not. She's definitely not. What I'll tell you that I recognize in her that I think it's really important for the majority of parents to understand that they need to provide a space for their kids where they can be powerful. And join me on this discussion because kids, since they're born, they're being told what to do. At home, did you clean up your room? Did you make your breakfast? Did you get this? Did you put your shoes away? Did you da-da-da? And then they get to school, the teacher's constantly, pay attention, put your phone down, do this, do that. Then they leave there, they go to the extracurricular activity, whichever it is, do this, walk center stage, do that, pick up whichever sport they are, do this, run faster, elbow in. Their whole lives, from the minute they wake up to the minute they go to bed, they're being told what to do constantly. And nobody is actually giving them space to express their power, to express their will, to develop and explore other sides of their personality. They're just, yes, they need guidance. They are a developing human in the world, but they need to come into a space where during that 1 hour, they are experiencing the power within themselves. And that's what I try my best to integrate mothers and daughters in this program, because I think it's really important that you get the mother and the kid and the girl in the space where now I am validating the space for you and you're validating that space for me, and I am going to live in my greatest power while you can also live in your greatest power. Therefore, the dynamic even at home doesn't need to be in competition and who's the bigger person is. I am guiding you through these principles, and there is a dynamic where you have to respect me because I'm doing this for the best of you. But at the same time, when we are here, I want you to be at your most powerful self. And they leave feeling capable. They leave feeling, wow, I really had an opportunity to express myself. And you're using your body as a vessel. And it is important that we feel strong in our bodies. So they're playing with bays. And then with the moms, they're pushing the mom and they're pulling the mom, which if you're at home, it's like, what did you just do?
Go to your room.
Yeah, but here you have permission to experiment. And it's interesting because I never had any case where then they said, oh, now they're pushing me around the house. They're not, because they know this is a space that we have all agreed to help each other get better, get stronger, and
you're there
more
guiding.
powerful.
You're there guiding them and teaching them why they are doing that in this space, which is so great.
And there are boundaries, but the boundaries become clear to them how far they can go and what are the moments that there's no limits for them. Like, let yourself shine and hold yourself strong in this space, and you're going to get a little bit of freedom as well to discover. And then they experience the full spectrum of emotions, because there are classes that they're feeling frustrated. There are classes they're feeling pride because they did that thing really well. There are classes that, they are being humbled, or there are days they're tired. And it doesn't matter, because every single day they show up in my class, regardless of how they feel, I am consistent. So if they're tired, if they're in a good mood, if they're in a bad mood, if they're super excited, if something happened that they're upset, I am the same for them, right? And then they're able to go into that journey and reconnect with their power, because it's a safe place.
It's so true. I have to switch to Mount Everest. Wait, I just said Mount. You climbed. I still can't, I think about it often, and I'm like, wait, I have to get this chick on my podcast. She fucking climbed Mount Everest.
I can't believe it either. So
It's
we're
so
in the same place.
crazy. I like hiking. I like taking my dog for, no, you went all out. So can we just start from the beginning? So everyone knows who's listening or watching how this came about, your journey. I know it's a long story, but I just wanted to hear the highlight parts and what you got out of it, and really help women and everyone listening just talking about mindset, because that is going into, we're wrapping up the year. We're going into a new year. Everyone's writing down their, what they want to accomplish. For me personally, mindset's a huge thing that's going to get us from point A to point B, making those small baby steps towards our goal. So take it away.
Yes. So climbing Mount Everest was never on my bucket list, which for a lot of people it is. It's their life plan. And to me, I navigate the world with an open heart to the opportunities that come my way. And then I evaluate if they will be enriching for me or not. And Mount Everest is something that came completely last minute. Through my networking of athletes, I met a guide, and I had a 7-week notice to go trek to Everest Base Camp and climb another mountain.
Wait, where do you have to fly to go to Mount Everest? I didn't take geography. That's a really dumb blonde moment there. But seriously, where do you go?
So you fly into Nepal, to Kathmandu, and then from there you take a helicopter into Lukla, which is a smaller town, and then you start trekking from there. So
people live in that town.
There are several towns that people live, and they're isolated from everything. And the deeper you go through the trekking to Mount Everest, which takes 7 days, it's approximately 85 kilometers, then considering, the acclimatization hikes and everything.
And where does the cell phone service drop?
Most of the time, there's no signal.
Did you just keep checking your phone? You're like, oh shoot, I have no cell phone service.
Oh no, for me, I was just grateful that I could disconnect. I was very focused. I was 100% committed to what I was doing.
Okay, so now you have 7 weeks to train.
I have 7 weeks to train. I wasn't training for Everest. I was training for Le Boucher, which is a smaller mountain. And that is where the mindset comes in. Because the whole time in my journals, as I started preparing for it, I was writing down everything about Mount Everest. And everything was an internal discussion that I was having with myself of, I cannot believe I'm going to Everest Base Camp and I'm going to climb another mountain that is not Mount Everest. So that connection between your self-belief and then reality needs to exist, right? Because I had never climbed a mountain ever in my life. I had no mountaineering experience, and I didn't have enough time to prepare. So I immediately reached out to the best coach in mountaineering in the world, Mike McCassell. I heard about him at a Joe Rogan podcast, And his name stuck in my head. So when this opportunity came up, I immediately went, oh, I'm going to call that guy. And he took me on as a client. And it was really interesting because while he was training me for Le Boucher, and while I was training for Le Boucher, both of us, without communicating to each other, had our eyes on Mount Everest. And on week 4 of our 7-week camp, he would track my sleep and track my training sessions, everything. And he said, oh, you didn't sleep well last night. I would send him screenshots from everything. And I said, yeah, he's like, what's in your mind? And I said, I'm not this person who goes for the lesser summit. And and then he said, what do you want to ask me, Cesalina? And I said, just be very realistic with me. If I attempt to climb Mount Everest, do you think I'm going to die? And then he said, well, I've been training you for Mount Everest since day 1. And that moment it clicked. I didn't sleep again that night.
You're like, oh, shoot.
Definitely not sleeping tonight. But we made an agreement that I had a high altitude training camp in Portland for 3 days at the end of that week. And he said, I'm going to run all your metrics and I'll be able to give you a fully informed advice on whether you should try it or not. Because your body has
to be able to endure the...
You need to be prepared.
Okay.
Yeah, you need to be prepared. So he did all my VO2 max tests. He compared with his athletes that had climbed K2 and Everest. And he does mental tests, which are really interesting. So our training camp, we would train for 9 hours consecutively in one day. And I never thought that my body could endure that.
What kind of training, though? Is it like running, hiking, push-ups?
So we are in this gym that it's acclimatized to 20,000 feet initially. Like you can, transition from 10,000 feet to 11,000 feet. And it's altitude induced in the room. So you start feeling the effects of altitude in your body because I didn't have experience in that. So we are measuring my oxygen constantly, seeing how my body is going to respond. And immediately my oxygen dropped to like 79%, something like this. And then interestingly enough, towards the end of the day, my oxygen was back up to like 99%. And he said, I never saw somebody adapt to altitude so quickly. You're so efficient with oxygen. And then that attributes back into the breath work and the tools that I've practiced my whole life. Mm-hmm. And it was really interesting because the videographer, people in this altitude room spending the day with us, they were all getting dizzy and having to take breaks. And while I was training, we would do an hour and a half max climb, treadmill, walking backwards, walking forward, assault bike, just every single stimulus, stair climber, circuits. And he would, just take me to those moments where I would hit a wall and think that I can't keep going any further. Mm-hmm. And he would walk me through those walls. And that was really important. And towards the end, he did a training where we did a circuit between ice buckets where I would do a plank, like a 2-minute plank in that ice bucket. And within that time, as my extremities are frozen, he would start preparing the next station, which was a wall sit with Legos and rope. So I had to practice and apply specific knots from the mountain. And I had to do all these Lego things with my feet now on the ice, doing a wall sit with 45 pounds on my lap. So your body is an extreme place where you think you're going to break down, and then you have to think, and you have to perform very technical knots with frozen hands, So the whole time he was like, I am preparing you for what a bad day in the mountain is going to look like. Yeah. I'm preparing you if you lose your gloves and you still need to operate your ropes and your safety. Mm-hmm. And I need to make sure that you can stay on it. So he does everything from neurological evaluation to physiological, and how are you performing tasks under stress and exhaustion. So that was, the beginning. I say that my Everest climb started in Portland, and
you started in Portland and ended up in Nepal,
but it's that Everest thing where if you don't believe in yourself, then you already lost the first step. You're not even going to make the first step. And the most important thing is that you have to believe in yourself so much, especially when nobody else believes in you, because people will mimic their belief in you based upon your belief in yourself. If you're insecure about it, people will say wow, Cess, climb Le Boucher, attempt Everest next year. But if you're I can't believe I'm going to be there and I'm not going to do this. Am I going to die or can I go for it? And if they ask you, do you think you're ready? And in your heart, that's where the realism comes in. You know that you trained, you prepared, you studied, you did everything in your power to be ready, then that's where your self-belief comes in. We did it.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was
And
the
you made
deadliest season on Everest history. That was really difficult to face. And there were people in my expedition that had been climbing for 20 years. There were people that had climbed several 8,000-meter mountains, which means the death zone. So they had been in the death zone multiple times. There were people in my expedition that were on their third attempt on Everest. And all these people that I mentioned didn't make it. They turned back. And so what is the difference between this ice climbing instructor, super experienced mountain climber, the person who's on the third time in the death zone on Everest that has been climbing for decades, and me, having never climbed a mountain before? I'm special, yeah, but we all are. And I'm special because I believe I'm special. Therefore, I'm going to manifest situations in my life where I will keep moving forward. And it's the self-sabotage, it's the mindset. And when you get to the more extreme the space you are, the more the small things become the big things. In the mountains, the small things are the big things. You lose one glove on the death zone, you're probably going to die, or at least you're going to lose your hand. It's the beginning of the end for you. And in life, it's the same. It's the small things that are the big things. How do you talk to yourself every day? When you look at yourself in the mirror, do you immediately go to the place that you don't like? Do you go to check if you have cellulite in your butt? Or do you look at your nose and you're like, oh, when am I going to get that nose job? Or, oh, this thing. Or do you look and go like, how do you talk to yourself? I'm a badass.
I give myself a high five.
Nice.
And then I mess up my mirror. I'm like, oh, shoot, I just messed up my mirror. Now I have to clean it. But whatever. I feel better.
You physically do a high five?
Yeah, I do. I learned that from Mel Robbins. She's like do you know who Mel Robbins is? She has, she's like, she cracks me up. She just talks about the power of the high five. And I was like, yeah, I give myself a high five and it feels really good. And it's the small things that you do every day and that you tell yourself.
Yeah, because they compound. Believe in the power of compound. It's those invisible agreements that you make with yourself, that you're going to be kinder to yourself, that you're going to believe in yourself before others believe in you, that you're going to treat yourself as a sacred being, meaning, let me think about the decisions that I make on a daily basis. Are they constructive decisions or are they destructive decisions? That's why I bring it back to the importance of having strong principles that build this internal constitution. So when things don't go your way, or when you're exposed to scenarios that don't feel right, or when you internally start going towards a little bit of a destructive path, you recognize that because you have something really strong living within you. And we need more of that. The principles of jiu-jitsu, they fully applied in the mountain. And that was my goal. When I accepted that challenge to attempt to climb Mount Everest, I didn't know what the result was going to come. I didn't know what the outcome was, but in my head, I visualized, yes, I'm going to make it to the top. And I was so happy when I did it. But my motivation in the core of my being, I knew that I needed to put those principles to test, both for myself and for my students. It is a huge responsibility to be making statements and sharing these tools with them. And the more I'm able to apply them outside of the mats, the more power they have when I come back and I show them, look, I've never done this thing before. This jiu-jitsu got me to the top of the world, 100%. The skills that I had to learn in those 7 weeks, people can learn. But the tools that you learn in jiu-jitsu and those principles, they're built throughout your life, and it's never too late to get into them. And they are life-changing. So when you start understanding connection, what does it mean to connect? Connection is the most important principle in jiu-jitsu, is what allows you to apply leverage. And when you are on the mats, you start understanding and reshaping a relationship with connection. We all connect in this world. It's the only way for a species to survive. But the way we see connection is not what connection really is. Because does connection imply harmony? Do we need to connect with places that we have no harmony at all? Yes. Right? So then we start understanding that there is an existing connection. How can I make this work in my favor? How can I apply leverage in this dynamic so it becomes more positive for me, instead of going deep into the rabbit hole and completely blowing this up? Something that a lot of times you spent years of your life building. And now, because the dynamic shifted, somebody else in your team came in, your relationship, this thing happened. Now everything, goes down because you didn't really have tools to navigate those changes.
So outside of jiu-jitsu, What does your day look like then? Like if you're not doing jiu-jitsu, are you waking up? Are you going to the gym? Are you doing yoga? Are you doing meditation? Are you,
Every day of my life looks different. I pretty much actually teach every day, different scenarios, different age groups. I work a lot with corporates, and I teach the principles of jiu-jitsu in companies. It's all tailored according to their needs. It's improving the connection within the teams. It's building a stronger foundation in the company. It is building a strong foundation within each employee, so it sustains their growth while supporting the people around them.
I think our government needs jiu-jitsu. They need to bring you to the White House.
That's what we used to do in Brazil. The first school that my grandfather created in Brazil was at a super high level place, and the president of Brazil was training. It was, a very specific,
effective.
Yeah.
That's
because
amazing.
it is, we call it human chess, but it is a mental tool more than anything else. You just use your body to express it in a way, But yeah, I teach every day, and then I do travel a lot, and I love surfing. I love being in the water, and I'm always open to different practices. I got a little bit into yoga, not too much. I feel like I get a lot of flexibility from jiu-jitsu, so I get to work on that, on that space. And I read a lot. I spend a lot of my time doing research and trying to understand what are the new findings and data in psychology, language, how can I improve this methodology? So if I'm not on the mats, I'm actually at home working on the methodology, including things, reshaping things, doing instructor certification training. So I have more people spreading this methodology and every few months going on a crazy expedition.
Okay, so
then
what's next? Where are you going next?
I have a few options, and my heart is at building our headquarters now in LA. So I tell people that's my new expedition.
That's your Mount Everest.
Yeah, that is my next Everest, and I have opportunities of doing 2 expeditions that would be really interesting. We are exploring the logistics to see which one I'll pick, but more than anything, until, we have this school built, which is literally a school of empowerment that welcomes, everyone, and pretty much they walk in and they feel this place was built for me. That's where I'm at. That's my new challenge. And it's interesting because even within our own lives, you don't need to climb Mount Everest to face challenges. For me, even like continuing to offer the pink gi and go against tradition in a way where sometimes some people in my family are like, oh, we wear white gis, what are you doing? But even those little things, sometimes we don't realize how things that people close to us sometimes can affect us. And it's unquestionable for me why we do this and why we need that space, because it's a space that nobody else will understand but us. So that's where I'm going next. I'm building the headquarters in LA, so we have a home.
That is amazing. Well, I definitely don't think I can climb Mount Everest, but I will be happy to take you to Runyon Canyon and we can go for a walk together.
Let's go.
Or maybe you could challenge me to do something.
We'll do a breathwork session in the end.
Oh my God, that'd be amazing. Well, thank you so much. And for everybody listening or watching, where can they find you?
So I'm launching my website in January, Cesalina.com, working on that. And socials, Instagram is really the only one I sort of check 1-2 times a day, and Cesalina Gracie. And yeah.
And that's it?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Posture of the champion, baby. Yeah.
Thank you everybody for joining in on today's episode. I really, really appreciate it. Wow, I have learned so much, and I hope you guys get to take away so much. And please feel free to share these messages with your friends, your family, and your children, and any women in your life. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And if there's anybody that you would love to have on the podcast or any topics you would like me to explore, please let me know and I will make sure to get them on the podcast. Riley, take it over. You can find us on YouTube or anywhere that you listen to your podcast. Bye.
Yay Networks.